Welcome to the Mount Pleasant Missionary Baptist Church Leadership Development Training. This is part of a series called A Call to Leadership, which will focus today on the first module. The module is entitled The Miseducation of Leaders. Our mission is to help you to make the most of the resources that we'll be providing to make you an appropriate and effective leader. So today's training entitled The Miseducation of Leaders is part of our training series and the first module installment, but the title is a little bit interesting, right? The Miseducation of Leaders. What does that mean? Well, you might recall a book written in the 1930s by Carter G. Woodson entitled The Miseducation of the Negro, or you might remember Lauryn Hill's album title in the 1990s, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. And while they were focused on indoctrination and inadequate learning, imagine being pushed into a leadership role, but not necessarily knowing the work that goes into self-improvement, being conscious of others, context, research, and just really doing the work of being a really good and effective leader that cultivates leadership in others. So let's get started. As a reflection, there are so many biblical references to leadership. And so for this module, we'll start with the book of Romans, chapter 12, verses 4 through 8. For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. We have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy, if in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If your gift is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. So what we'll cover in this module is the definition of leadership, highlighting emotional intelligence, how leaders can be influencers, and the importance of multi-generational leadership. We'll take that dive into self-consciousness for this module and some concepts to be aware of as one builds self-consciousness as part of their emotional intelligence and to become a good and effective leader. We'll take a look at 10 truths of leadership, and those basic truths of leadership debunk a few myths of what it means to be a leader. And then finally, we'll provide an overview of future lessons, which will highlight different types of leaders, consciousness of others, being aware of your surroundings, being aware of what's happening, and of course, keeping in mind context and so much more. So let's be candid here. There's so many different definitions and trainings around leadership. And if you've worked in any environment, you probably had some type of leadership training, or maybe if you're serving in the community or working in ministry, there's been a host of trainings offered around leadership. So for some of you, this might all be a review, but for others, this might be new information. And of course, we welcome any feedback as these modules wrap up. So leadership involves equipping, influencing, and building others. The actual act of coordinating and balancing a task, outlining actions and goals, and keeping in mind the interests of all members and stakeholders is a really important part of leadership. And that requires having emotional intelligence, the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions and use that information to guide one's thinking and actions. That's one reference provided by Solovoy and Mayer. However, the components of emotional intelligence can include and are not limited to having empathy, listening, again, being conscious of self, others, and context. It involves being deeply in tune with one's emotions, knowing your values, your beliefs, strengths, abilities, even having some understanding of your limitations and worldview. Self-awareness is a process of growth. And it's okay to get into a leadership role knowing that there's more growth to be had. Let's take a look at Miss A here. Let's say she's in a situation where She's working on organizing with a group of people, but it's been a little difficult because the issue that they're focused on is a very emotional issue for her, causes frustration and even anger. Or maybe she doesn't like the way other people are approaching the subject matter. But as part of emotional intelligence, Miss A does the work of regulating her emotional responses in order to be a more effective collaborator. Mr. B, on the other hand, let's say he acts as a coach. He takes the time to think about how individuals may perceive his coaching style. Maybe there could be an emotional response from others or frustrations. And so he's very conscientious of how he interacts with others, being complimentary, not patronizing, but also being understanding of why his coaching style is so important into getting things done. So let's look at the value of self consciousness. Honestly, if it becomes a priority in your leadership style, you actually begin to step outside of your comfort zone. You listen to others, you accept mentorship and growth as part of the process. Listening, growing, staying focused, seeking feedback, and identifying what your stressors are all important parts of leadership development. So let's take a look at navigating stressors. I don't know about you, but there are times when I'm frustrated or frustrated at myself because I'm procrastinating or I've got a lot going on. So there could be a multitude of situational stressors. You know that something's coming, or you are stressed out about a particular situation because you have some ideas of what could go wrong. Or there could be encounter stressors. You're interacting with a leader, or you're interacting with others that are part of an organization. And that may come with some stress because you know that there will be additional explanations or details that you'll need to provide in that situation. And then there's the anxiety around anticipatory stressors. You're working up to a big event or a presentation, and you know that there's a lot of work that went into it, but you're anticipating that something could go wrong. So learning how to navigate that and calm yourself, go into prayer, pray before your meetings. How many of you have done that? Most of us try to, but sometimes we forget because we get caught up in our busy schedules. And then, of course, there's time stressors. You're competing, trying to get things done. You may have a full schedule for the day, but you've got to get an additional task completed, drop something off to someone, whatever it is. There's oftentimes a lot of time stressors that come in accepting a leadership role. I'm not going to go through the entire list here, but just keep in mind these are something to circle back to. So part of that consciousness of self component is really involved in being in tune to authenticity, having a healthy self esteem, flexibility, some level of optimism, taking initiative, and being conscious of your achievements. Now, we'll cover in later modules why that's all important for consciousness of self, but also the components of being conscious of others and context. Now, what aligns with being conscious of others and also yourself? Knowing that leaders are heavy influencers. I have a little icon here in the corner that references what some of us are familiar with, social media influencers. But think about being influential from the perspective of multi-generational leadership, or knowing that the information you put out there may in fact affect someone else. Now, if you run well but are unable to pass the baton to another runner, you lose the race. But if you run well, recruit and train other good runners, and learn how to hand off the baton smoothly, guess what? You can win. And when it comes to influence, if you can conduct the process repeatedly, you can multiply your influence incredibly. Leaders are influencers, and they think broadly, and they build the next generation. But they also collaborate with those that are part of their own generation, their peers, and they can be influential. So let's take a closer look again at self-consciousness. Authenticity obviously is being yourself, but being transparent and trustworthy, sticking with your values, knowing that if you said you were going to do something for someone, if you can't do it, that you're honest and you explain that to them. That's being authentic. To thine own self, be true. Some of you might remember that quote in Hamlet, but that's a really important part of authenticity. Not going to go through the whole list, but another factor is to be flexible. Be open and adaptive to change. Flexibility requires listening, requires constant learning, but you may, in fact, maintain your beliefs and values, especially if they're integral to who you are, but you're willing to do the work to collaborate with others and show that you can, in fact, be flexible. And another part that's really important in self consciousness is knowing your story. Do you know that your story is really part of your authenticity? Being able to share an honest story with people sometimes can save another person. It can be beneficial to others. So keep that in mind when you're thinking in terms of self consciousness. So here's 10 truths of leadership. This list is not exhaustive. As I said earlier, there are so many different trainings on leadership, and the purpose of this first module is to really look at not only the miseducation of leaders, but the importance of self consciousness and emotional intelligence. But then keep in mind, there are some realities of leadership. Leadership is both an art and science. If you know someone that's extremely creative, they can paint a great picture of what leadership looks like. But then there's some theories that they also use to help build their leadership. Leadership can be learned and developed. It is available to all. You don't have to be the head honcho, of course, to be the person that's in a leadership role. It does not require a title or position. It's more than the leader, it's about the people that we're serving. Leadership can be stressful, difficult, and sometimes even dangerous. Leadership involves bringing about a positive change. It is an interpersonal activity. You actually have to learn how to work and interact with others. No one theory is the best theory. We can come up with 50 different components of leadership, and they're all very decent and helpful. So keep that in mind. Don't feel like, oh, well, I read the John Maxwell book and there's no other. Someone else may say, well, the Salovoy book is great. Um, I could go down a list of names, but that's not important. What's important is that you're open to multiple theories that are beneficial and helpful, and then plenty of biblical references. So leadership does require inner work. Now, these are 10 truths of leadership. They're not exhaustive, but something to marinate on and consider when you're thinking about how can you improve your leadership capacity. Leadership is so important in multiple avenues in our lives, whether you're in the ministry, serving in a political role, community organizing, doing or conducting nonprofit work, helping others, in the business sector, and in so many different areas of our lives. Leadership is essential. We need leaders, and we need to cultivate the strengths of the next generation of leaders. So, this was just a short snippet to provide you with an introductory basis for understanding why there have been some faulty theories out there, but there's some really good information about leadership. We'll cover other modules in the future, which will identify some biblical references to leadership, being conscious of others, the work of empathy, and more, types of leadership styles, being conscious of context and being aware of others and potential situations, understanding the importance of researching and knowing your environment when you are a leader, and then finally, focusing on courageous leaders and stepping out on faith. We'll come back to that last phrase in just a second. So, we all have different gifts according to the grace given to each of us by God. The question I have for you, and I ask myself often, is what are you doing to be a conduit in the kingdom of God? Now, now that we've covered just a bit of information, again, for this first module, the miseducation of leaders, you're a better leader already. Go ahead and check out the church website, mountpleasantch.org, for more leadership development training, videos, and access to all of these tools. Kingdom leaders, it's your time to shine. Now that you've listened to the first module, the miseducation of leaders,
I want you to think about the challenges that Pastor put before us. There are a multitude of strategies to really build leaders and to become an effective leader. But as you're thinking about your work as a leader, consider the first challenge. If you're already in a leadership role and you're already in a position where you're mentoring others, think about the first challenge and ask yourself, what are you doing to build the next generation of leaders? The challenge before us is that we must prepare the way for the next generation of leaders to take what we have built and inspire them to run with it. The second challenge is really directed at those that are learning. Considering multi-generational leadership, future leaders, there's so much work that you can do as well. It's your time to take your rightful place. You must embrace your identity as kingdom leaders in your various realms of influence. You may be active on social media or among your peer group. Well, take that activity and think about how are you leading others and what are you doing to build your strength as a leader. No titles are needed, as I shared earlier. So again, kingdom leaders, it's your time to shine.